The church felt colder than it should have. Not the kind of cold that comes from air conditioning being set too low, but a deeper, heavier cold. Hey everyone! Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss stories like this. Now, let's start today's story. One that settles inside your bones and lingers like a warning. Maybe it was because my son's coffin lay at the front of the aisle, draped in white lilies, his favorite since childhood, while one seat remained painfully, aggressively empty. His wife's seat. My daughter-in-law, Mia. Every time someone walked through those wooden double doors, my heart gave a tiny, foolish jump. Maybe it was her. Maybe she'd come rushing in at the last second, tears streaking down her face, ready to collapse into grief at the foot of her husband's coffin. But it wasn't her. People kept arriving, family, co-workers, neighbors, friends. The hushed whispers of grief filled the space, bouncing off the stained glass windows and echoing through the pews. Some hugged me tightly, some cried into my shoulder, and some quietly shared memories of Daniel, stories I clung to like fragile pieces of him still left in this world. But almost everyone asked the same question. Where's Mia? Each time, I forced a polite smile. A practiced lie. She must be on her way. And each time those words left my mouth, something inside me cracked a little more. Because I knew the truth. She wasn't coming. An hour earlier, I had called her, my voice soft, trembling, desperate. I told myself she was grieving in her own way, that maybe she needed comfort. But she rejected the call. Not even a text. Nothing. A minute later, her phone switched off. I stared at that empty seat so intensely that the fabric started to blur. I imagined her walking in late and breathless, apologizing, claiming traffic or panic or shock. I imagined her taking her place beside me, holding my hand, mourning the man we both loved. But imagination was all I had. Because Mia was nowhere. My son's best friend, Aaron, leaned in close, his voice low. She really isn't coming, is she? I swallowed hard, forcing out a weak, I don't know. But I did know. And now, everyone else was beginning to know too. The priest approached quietly, his eyes compassionate and questioning. Shall we begin? His voice felt like the final confirmation that she wasn't coming. I forced myself to nod. As the ceremony began, I tried to focus on the prayers, the hymns, the eulogies, but my mind was trapped between grief and confusion. I kept glancing at that empty seat, trying to understand why Mia, his wife, would miss this. The last goodbye. The one moment meant to honor Daniel's life. Maybe she was too devastated. Too broken to face reality. That thought hurt, yet it comforted me too, because it was kinder than the alternative. Or, did she simply not care? The thought was sharp as a knife, slicing through the fragile hope I'd been desperately clinging to. I hated myself for even thinking it. Grief was unpredictable, it made people shut down, hide, run. I reminded myself this over and over, but the longer the funeral went on, the heavier the silence around Mia's absence grew. The whispers started spreading like wildfire. Where is she? Why isn't she here? She didn't even show up. My cheeks burned with shame, not for myself, but for her. For the disrespect it cast on my son. When the priest called family members to come forward for their final farewells, people once again turned toward the doors as if hoping Mia would magically appear. Still nothing. When I rose to approach Daniel's coffin, my knees trembled as though carrying the weight of every memory I had ever created with my boy. I walked slowly, deliberately, because rushing felt wrong, like it would cheapen the last steps I would ever take toward him. When I reached him, the world blurred. The wood of the coffin was smooth beneath my shaking palm. Warm from the lights, but cold from the reality it held. I'm sorry, I whispered so quietly that even the priest beside me couldn't hear. I tried to hold everything together. I tried to be strong. But your wife, she should have been here. You deserved better. Tears spilled freely now, unapologetically. I didn't bother wiping them away. As the coffin began to lower, my heart clenched so tightly it felt like someone had wrapped a fist around it. For a moment, I thought I might collapse. But I stayed standing, because that's what mothers do. We stay standing even when the world falls apart. Then I noticed the shift in the room. It was subtle at first, a ripple of gasps, murmurs, the sound of phones buzzing. People were glancing at their screens, their faces morphing from confusion to shock to something I couldn't yet name. I turned, wiping my tears. What happened? My niece stood frozen, her phone in hand, her eyes wide. "Auntie. Mia just posted something." Her voice trembled. My stomach tightened. "Posted what?" But she didn't show me. Not yet. Not while the priest was still speaking. Not while my son was being lowered into the earth. I forced myself to finish the ceremony, though every breath felt like a shard of glass wedged between my ribs. The moment the final prayer ended and people began to drift toward the exit, my niece finally approached me, her hand shaking as she turned her phone toward me. "Auntie, you need to see this." I looked. And my blood turned to ice. It was a picture. A picture of Mia. Smiling. Glass in hand. Sitting at a rooftop bar with friends, dressed in glittering clothes like she was celebrating a birthday or a vacation, not mourning her husband. The caption sparkled mockingly beneath it. "Finally free Sparkle's cocktail glass." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The world didn't just tilt, it shattered. That night, while my son was being buried, his wife was celebrating his absence. And in that moment, something inside me broke in a way I knew would never fully heal. People assume grief hits all at once, like a wave crashing over you. But mine came in slow, suffocating punches, one after another, until I struggled to breathe. After the funeral, I went home alone. The house felt quieter than ever. Daniel's slippers were still by the door. His jacket still hung on the hanger. His favorite mug sat in the drying rack. All untouched. Everything reminded me of him. But what I couldn't get out of my mind was the picture. That cruel, glittering smile of Mia's. The caption. The timing. The audacity. I sat at the dining table, staring at my phone, reading the comments under her post. "Girl, you deserve it. About time you lived your life. Cheers to new beginnings." Every comment stabbed deeper. How could they celebrate while my son lay in the ground? My hand trembled as I typed a message. "Me. Why weren't you at the funeral?" The message went to delivered, but not read. I waited an hour. 2. 3. Nothing. Finally, at almost midnight, I wrote another message. "Me. You posted a picture at a bar while we buried Daniel. Why would you do that? Why would you skip his funeral? Please explain." Still nothing. I must have stared at the screen for so long that I didn't hear the knock at my door. When I opened it, Aaron stood there, red-eyed and exhausted. "Can I come in?" I nodded. We sat quietly for a long moment before he finally spoke. "There's something you should know." My heart tightened. "About Mia?" He hesitated. "About Daniel." I froze. "What about him?" Aaron rubbed his face, sighing deeply. "He didn't tell you because he didn't want you to worry. But things between him and Mia, they weren't good. 4 months. I shook my head. I knew they argued sometimes, but... No, his voice was firm. It was worse than arguments. Mia, she was seeing someone else. I felt my stomach twist. No. She wouldn't. She did, he said quietly. Daniel found messages. Pictures. The day he told me, he cried harder than I'd ever seen him cry. My knees weakened. I sat slowly. But, why didn't he tell me? He didn't want to break your heart. He kept hoping she'd change. My eyes filled. Did she? Stop. Aaron shook his head. She told him she wanted a divorce. My whole world shifted. My heart hurt so badly I could barely breathe. Is that why she didn't come today? I whispered. Aaron nodded slowly. I think she already moved on. Moved on. Those words cut deeper than anything else. But the picture, I murmured. The caption, finally free. Aaron swallowed. She meant free from him. My hand flew to my mouth. My son died heartbroken. And she celebrated it. It wasn't just circulating among her friends anymore, it had gone far beyond that. People on different platforms shared the screenshot with dramatic captions. Some cursed her, some defended her, others made jokes or turned her face into memes like grief was a game. My son's death, turned into entertainment. Some comments were vicious. This woman is pure evil. Imagine celebrating while your husband's being buried. Others, somehow, painted her as the hero. Good for her, he probably held her back. Freeing yourself from a toxic man is valid. And a few simply wanted drama. Spill the tea fire. What happened between them? It felt like the world had decided to dissect my family's pain, analyzing it, twisting it, trying to turn it into a story they could consume between morning coffee and lunchtime gossip. And Mia? She deleted the post, but only after tens of thousands had already seen it, shared it, and saved it. You can't erase something once the internet gets its hands on it. I knew she wasn't sorry. Not for the caption. Not for the timing. Not for the humiliation she'd caused. She deleted it because the backlash was getting too loud. Still no response to my messages. Her silence wasn't just cruel, it was deliberate. It was a message of its own, I don't care. My grief, heavy and suffocating, slowly began turning into something else. A burning need for answers. A need for truth. A need to understand how a woman my son once adored could become so cold, so indifferent, so vicious. I spent half the morning pacing the house, staring at my phone, rereading the comments, the captions, the hundreds of messages people were sending me privately, some supportive, some curious, some shamelessly intrusive. But none of it mattered. What mattered was confronting the person at the center of all this. So I grabbed my keys and drove to her apartment. The building was quiet, the hallways dimly lit. My footsteps echoed as I approached her door. For a long moment, I stood there, hand hovering over the wood, begging myself to turn around. My heart pounded hard enough to hurt. But I knocked. 3 sharp taps. When the door opened, Mia stood there, blinking as though sunlight had stabbed her awake. She looked shocked to see me, though not the kind of shock I hoped for. Not guilt, not remorse, not fear. Just irritation. "Oh," she said flatly. "You." Her tone made something inside me curl in anger. Her hair was tied up messily in a knot that looked like she'd slept on it. Her makeup was smudged, eyeliner streaked like she hadn't bothered to wash her face last night. She wore an oversized t-shirt and shorts, casual and careless, as if she hadn't just caused the internet to erupt in outrage. She leaned against the doorframe, crossing her arms lazily. "What do you want?" What I wanted. As if I was intruding, interrupting her precious morning. I stared at her, taking in the woman my son loved more than life. The woman he defended. The woman he cried over. The woman he believed in even when she didn't deserve it. "I want to know why you didn't come to my son's funeral," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. She rolled her eyes so dramatically I thought they might fall out of her head. "I didn't feel like going." I froze. Didn't feel like it. My breath hitched, anger burning my chest. "You didn't feel like saying goodbye. He was your husband." "Ex-husband," she corrected sharply. "We were done. He just didn't know how to let go." My stomach twisted. "You were still married," I whispered. "Not emotionally," she snapped back, shrugging. "I checked out a long time ago." The hallway suddenly felt too small, too suffocating. I gripped the side of the doorframe just to steady myself. "You posted a picture celebrating," I said, my voice breaking. "While he was being buried." She lifted her chin defiantly. "What I do is none of your business." I stared at her in disbelief. The coldness in her eyes was unreal, like she had turned off every human part of herself. "He loved you," I whispered, helplessly, pathetically. She scoffed, a harsh, ugly sound. "He loved the version of me in his head. That's not my fault." Somewhere deep inside, something cracked. Tears gathered in my eyes. Why would you hurt him like this? Why pretend? Why marry him at all if you never cared? She studied me for a moment, then something shifted in her expression. Her lips curled, not into a sad smile or a remorseful one, but into something almost amused. "Because he was safe," she said simply. "He provided. He made life easy. But I got tired. And when I tried to leave, he begged, cried, promised he'd change. I didn't want to deal with that anymore." The world swayed around me. Safe. Easy. Convenient. She had used my son like a stepping stone, discarding him the moment she got bored. "You broke him," I whispered, voice trembling violently. She offered a careless shrug. "Not my problem. People break all the time." Her words slapped me harder than any physical blow. "Did you ever love him?" I choked out. She tilted her head, eyes gleaming with twisted humor. "Define love." And that was it. That was the moment something inside me snapped, cleanly, sharply, like a bone breaking under too much pressure. I felt it in my spine, in my breath, in the way my voice steadied into icy calm. I straightened and met her gaze head-on. "For your sake, Mia," I said quietly but firmly, "I hope one day you understand what you've done. Because the world already sees you differently. And soon, so will everyone else." For the first time, the smirk faltered. But only for a second. Then her expression hardened again. "Goodbye," she said coldly. The door slammed inches from my face. I stood there in the hallway, my entire body trembling, from anger, from heartbreak, from disgust. From the realization that the woman I once called family was nothing more than a stranger wearing my son's last name. The truth was finally clear. She wasn't grieving. She wasn't broken. She wasn't confused. She simply didn't care that my son was dead. And that was a pain deeper than grief. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while the darkness around me felt heavier than anything I had ever known. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel's handwriting. I saw the ultrasound photo. I heard his voice in those recordings, fragile, defeated, cracking under the weight of a love that had destroyed him instead of protecting him. No mother should ever hear their child cry like that. No mother should ever discover their child died believing they weren't enough. By morning, one thing had settled clearly, sharply, painfully inside me. Daniel deserved justice. He deserved dignity. He deserved truth. And I was the only one left who could give him that. So I made coffee I didn't drink. I dressed in clothes I barely registered wearing. Then I placed everything, the letter, the USB drive, the screenshots, the audio files, inside a folder and headed to the police station. The walk from the parking lot to the station's entrance felt surreal. My legs were trembling, my fingers stiff from clenching the folder too tightly. When I pushed open the heavy glass doors, it felt like stepping into another world, one where I wasn't just a grieving mother, but a woman carrying the last pieces of her son's truth. I told the officer at the front desk, "I need to speak to someone. It's about my son's death." Within minutes, I was in a small interview room, facing two investigators. I placed everything on the table and explained, slowly, carefully, painfully, what Daniel had left behind. They listened. They asked questions. They took notes. They requested permission to copy the files. And as they reviewed the evidence, their expressions changed, from curiosity to disbelief, then to something darker. The kind of expression people wear when they realize a tragedy was avoidable. When they realize someone else planted the seeds. What followed was a whirlwind I could barely keep up with. More interviews. More statements. A full digital examination of everything Daniel had recorded. They asked me about his marriage, about the timeline, about Mia's behavior. They told me they needed to corroborate everything. I understood. I wanted them to. But nothing prepared me for how fast the story spread. I didn't tell anyone, not friends, not neighbors, not even Aaron. But someone inside the investigation leaked it. By the next morning, my phone buzzed non-stop. Notifications poured in. I didn't check them, but eventually the headline appeared in every corner of the internet. Widow who skipped husband's funeral exposed in shocking abuse case. The comments were a firestorm. People who had once defended Mia now dissected every detail of her life. They shared the funeral photo. They shared her bar photo. They shared her old posts, analyzing every caption, every smile, every outfit. Her social media vanished within hours. Sponsors issued statements publicly cutting ties. Influencers who once praised her now condemned her. The man she'd been seeing unfollowed her, blocked her, and released a statement distancing himself from her entirely. The world had turned against her. But none of that brought me comfort. The only thing I wanted was the truth to be recognized, legally, officially. Then, one morning, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Mia. She was nothing like the woman who had once smirked at me, arms crossed and dripping with contempt. Her eyes were swollen and bloodshot. Her hair was messy, her clothes wrinkled. She was shaking, not from cold, but from fear. "What did you do?" she hissed, stepping forward like a cornered animal. I didn't flinch. I told the truth. "You ruined my life," she spat. "No," I said calmly. "You ruined Daniel's." She froze. For a moment, the hallway was completely silent. Her lips trembled, not with guilt, but with panic. And in that moment, I saw her clearly for the first time. No pretense, no performance, no excuses. Just a woman terrified of consequences she never thought she'd face. "You need to tell them I didn't mean any of it," she said, her voice cracking. "You need to say I'm grieving and unstable. That I wasn't thinking straight." I stared at her. "No." Her mouth fell open. "You owe me." "I owe my son," I whispered. A flicker of something, desperation, disbelief, maybe even rage, flashed across her face. "They're going to arrest me," she choked out. "They already took my passport. They think I contributed to his state of mind. They said the evidence looks bad. Please. Please help me. Help her." After everything Daniel had endured. After everything she had done. After she celebrated the night he was buried. I looked at her, and for the first time in months, I felt nothing. "You should have come to the funeral," I said softly. "You should have said goodbye." Then I closed the door. Her muffled sobs echoed faintly through the wood, but I didn't open it again. Weeks passed. Investigators built their case with meticulous care. The prosecution gathered testimonies from neighbors, friends, co-workers, people who had witnessed the deterioration of Daniel's emotional state. The audio recordings were authenticated. The threats Mia made were verified. The messages where she mocked him were traced back to her device. And then, one crisp morning, Mia was arrested. Not for murder, because Daniel's death was ultimately ruled non-criminal, but for emotional abuse, coercive control, harassment, and destruction of prenatal evidence. Charges that carried weight. Charges that matched the truth of what she'd done. Charges Daniel deserved to be acknowledged. Her trial made national news. People debated it online, on TV, in podcasts. Some mourned for Daniel. Some debated the legal definitions. Some argued about mental health, relationships, and accountability. But for me, it wasn't about noise. It wasn't about attention. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about my son. My kind, hopeful boy who believed love could fix anything, even someone who never truly loved him back. I visit Daniel every Sunday. I bring lilies, his favorite. I sit beside him. I talk about my week, my memories, my dreams. Sometimes I cry. Sometimes I smile. And every now and then, when the wind moves softly through the cemetery trees, when the world grows quiet enough to hear a pin drop, I swear I can hear him whisper, "Thank you, Mom." Because in the end, he wasn't forgotten. He wasn't silenced. He wasn't alone. I carried his truth. And I always will. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more heartfelt stories like this. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.